Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. For years, I improvised a new bedtime story for my children every night. Now, we would like to share the recordings of the best of those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children.
Was a watchmaker, and she was known far and wide for making unique watches. She made watches that had only second hands for people who just wanted to be able to time things and didn't really care what time it was. She made watches with only hour hands for people who liked to know roughly what time it was, but didn't like to care too much about exactly what time it was. She made watches that had little alarms on them where they could ding. She even had a cuckoo watch, which was a watch that had sort of little doors in it, and every hour on the hour, a little cuckoo bird would pop its head out and say cuckoo, 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 however many times the hour was. Well, one day the watchmaker was sitting in her shop when the door opened, and a man dressed in a black robe with silver and golden stars on it, and a tall pointed hat also with silver and golden stars on it, came in. He said, "I'm the wizard Rantu, and I have a magical watch." The watchmaker looked up and said, "How nice for you. May I see it?" Rantu looked at her and frowned just slightly. He said, "Of course you may see it. I'm here because it is no longer working, and I would like you to repair it for me." "Well," said the watchmaker, "I'll see what I can do. But I don't usually deal in magic watches because I have very little experience in magic." Rantu took out the watch. It was completely black. The band was black. The face of it was black. And on the face of it, there was the number of the hour. And the number turned in a full circle every hour so that you could tell what the minute was. And the watchmaker, whose name was Jeanine, said, "It's very beautiful. I've never seen anything like it." "Well," said Rantu, "can you fix it?" "Well, I don't know," said Jeanine. "What's the problem with it?" "The problem," said Rantu, with a frown, "is that it doesn't tell the time where I am." "Oh," said Jeanine, "so it tells the wrong time? Can't you just reset it?" "I've tried. It just goes back to a different time." Said Jeanine. "Well, I tell you what, why don't you leave it here, and I'll take a look at it. I won't touch any parts I don't understand, and if I see anything that I can use to fix it, I'll let you know. You can come back for it tomorrow." Rantu frowned at her for a moment, and then he took off his watch and handed it to her. Jeanine said, "I'll get right to work." She heard the bell of the door ring as he left her shop, and then she carefully put on her magnifying glasses and opened up the back of the watch to see all the little tiny gears and pieces inside. She said, "Well, a lot of things about this look like any other watch." She took out some of the gears that she recognized, and she saw that there were some things she didn't recognize. There was sort of a glowing bluish crystal, and another white crystal, and those crystals seemed to help the gears decide when to move. And there was a big crystal on the front of the watch face that seemed to be the thing that allowed the number to show up and rotate. Oh, she was poking around inside the watch with her screwdriver when suddenly she felt a little tingle in her fingers like the watch had zapped her. And when she looked back down, the watch was not there. And just then she heard the door to her shop open, and she looked up, and there was Ren too. And she said, "Oh, you're back already?" And he said, I'm sorry, have we met before? I am the magician Ren too. I have brought you, and I have a magical watch." And Jeanine felt herself saying, "How nice for you, may I see it?" And he said, "Of course." And from there on, the whole thing replayed itself exactly as it had a few minutes before. And Jeanine just felt herself saying the same things over again, and she couldn't quite help herself. Till she got to the point where he handed her the watch and left again, and she opened it up, and she opened the back, and she tried really hard not to touch that particular spot. But despite trying hard not to, her screwdriver fit right into that little spot in the crystal, and she felt that zap again, and again the watch disappeared, and she heard Ren 2 coming into the shop, and as soon as he stepped in, before he had a chance to say anything, she said, "Stop! I'm stuck. Your watch has stuck me in a time loop. Don't give it to me." And Ren 2 frowned at her for a second, and he said, "I am the wizard Ren 2. And I have a magical watch." And they went through the whole thing again, and Jeanine was sure that she had to find a way, so she forced herself to drop the screwdriver as soon as he left the watch shop, and it took her a minute to pick it up, and she started disassembling the watch again. But she kept forcing herself to just move her fingers enough to drop that screwdriver, and finally it dropped, and it fell down in a crack the side of her desk. And she moved her desk, and by the time where she'd retrieved the screwdriver, she found that she could now move again and control what she did. And she said, "Oh, I am not going to touch that crystal again." And she put her screwdriver away, and instead she just carefully looked at the back of the watch. And she said, "This definitely is a magical watch. I don't want to be doing any traveling in time." She said, "I wonder what's wrong with it." And then she saw, when she looked very carefully, she saw that somehow a little speck of dust had gotten into the watch, and it was sitting right between two of the gears and keeping them from moving like they should. And so she took a little syringe, actually, and blew a puff of air to knock that dust out, and it flew out, and she put the back on the back of the watch, and she reset it, and she watched it, and it seemed to be keeping the correct time now. And she said, "Whew, tell you what, no more magical watches for me." And just then she heard the door to her shop open, and standing there was the man in the black cloak with the gold and silver stars and the tall pointy hat, and he said, "I'm the wizard Ren 2. And she said, "I know you are. Here's your magical watch back. I think it's fixed." And he looked at her, and he said, "That's curious. Well, I'm used to curious things happening with this watch. Thank you." And he took it back from her, and he said, "How much will that be?" And she said, "Well, can you pay me with a magic trick?" And he said, "I don't do tricks. I only do real magic." And she said, "Oh, well, here's what I would like. I would like flowers around my shop that bloom year-round." And he said, "Is that all?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "That's certainly something I can accomplish." And he walked out of the shop, and for a moment she thought that he was leaving, but then she saw him walk around the shop, and then he walked off. And she walked out of the shop. She was about to chase him and say, "Hey, aren't you going to pay me?" But when she walked out, she saw that all around her shop there were these little green sprouts coming out of the ground. And she decided to wait and see what happened. And every day the sprouts grew more until they became bushes, and then the bushes flowered in the most beautiful colors: pink, purple, yellow, and blue. And the flowers just kept coming year-round. Summer, winter, fall, spring, the flowers bloomed. And Jeanine's shop became known as not only one of the most talented watchmaker shops in her town, but also always the loveliest. and people would sometimes come and chat with her while she was working, just for the pleasure of looking at the flowers and smelling their beautiful aroma.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and running commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was created by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Swindlin. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, please tell them about it. Do you want more stories? You can now subscribe to the show and help pick a new story for me to tell every month. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.